When have we arrived? At what point would you say that you've reached a level of preparedness that you really want? When are you fully prepared if something major were to happen? It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately personally, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So let's chat about it. I've been doing this video to try and pull back for a moment and take an honest assessment of where I'm at this point in my preparedness journey. And I find myself asking myself often, when am I going to arrive? When will I consider myself fully prepared? At what point can I take a break and say I've arrived? And I'll try to answer that in just a moment. But before I do, I think it's important to address two important considerations. The first one, and I think we really have to make sure that we're careful about this in the preparedness community. I think it's dangerous to get into the constant frame of mind that something big is just about to happen. And of course, I acknowledge that anything is a possibility. A black swan event could come in out of the blue and change everything very quickly. The last several years, if they taught us anything, is that things can change very quickly in a matter of a few days. And I think it's led many of us to be anxious at a new level because we're always on that feeling of just being on the bubble. And the last few months, it feels like things have kind of gotten a little boring. I mean, yeah, there's been issues here and there. I'm not saying we're out of the woods, but there's not that as much in your face, just, oh my gosh, this is the next thing that's going to happen. And I only bring this up because I want to point out that as the last few years have been difficult, and I've had to really personally catch myself, because again, as I mentioned, it's that feeling that something's coming, that other shoe is about to drop, and it's exhausting to live in that state of mind all the time. And I hope that you can find peace, and something I've been working on, and I'm trying to really pull back as far as not allowing myself to mentally get caught up in that, but not pulling back on preparedness. But the point being is that I hope you can find that balance, is I guess what I'm trying to say, as you're on your preparedness journey, to not allow yourself to be constantly that feeling of, you're always falling forward, that there's something that's going to happen, that you've always got to be prepared, but rather, I hope you can find that position where you can stay back and prepare, but not get burned out at the same time. It's definitely a bit of a balancing act. Now, the second thing is you really need to answer the question, how prepared do you want to be? I always encourage people when they're starting out to ask that question, because for some, 3 days, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 3 months is all you need. For most people that consider themselves really hardcore preppers, most start 1 year as a starting point, or define 1 year as a starting point. And every person coming into the preparedness community, whether you're new or you've been doing this for any length of time, you really have to answer that question. And I would encourage you to give that a lot of thought at this time, because if you're in that state of what's coming next, is something major going to happen, and you haven't really defined that period of time that you want to prepare, I think you need to do that, because this will really dictate how much effort you want to put into this endeavor of being prepared. Now, back to the main point of this video, trying to answer the question, how much should you prepare, and will you ever fully be really prepared? My attention lately, and this is just my own story, is to really, again, the last few years, I've realized I need to take my preparedness up a whole nother level. Like many of us, we've had to reevaluate and take things up a notch. And what I have done is I've got to the position where I've stored enough food, water, so that if something major were to happen, my family, we would be all right. We could endure for a pretty long period of time. I've built systems on harvesting water. I need to improve and expand that out. That's a project that I'll be working on over the next few months. I have worked on gardening and raising chickens in my backyard. I've had limited successes and some failures, but I plan on doubling down and working on gardening over the next few months. I've got several videos in line that we're going to be doing to help you prepare in small spaces or apartment balconies, things like that. I've worked on building redundant backup power options for our home. I've built out our bug out bags, our gear. I've reviewed it many times. I've worked on security. I've got my ham radio license. I could go on, but the point is, at what point do you say, okay, that's enough? When have I arrived? When am I prepared enough? So to try and answer the question that, again, I'm posing here, at what point do you feel like you've reached your level of preparedness that you're comfortable with? If I'm being honest with you, and this is just and I'll talk about this more in a second, what I'm seeing on the horizon and what I'm concerned about, I'll put it that way. I feel like I've only begun to scratch the surface. I feel like I have the foundation set, but the real work I feel is ahead of me. What do I mean by that? Again, I feel like I have the core preps in place. I know my family, if there's any kind of disaster, will be all right. If there was a regional issue where we live, earthquakes are a big issue, fires are a big issue. We can handle most of those likely scenarios. But I think the next natural transition as a prepper, and the thing that is on my mind the most, is to try and increasingly develop the skills needed to become self-sufficient, to be capable of being able to produce and store the core things that are very important things like food, water, energy, all the issues in these items that I think, based on what we're all seeing, these issues will increasingly become, these items I should say, will become increasingly more scarce and vulnerable over the next several years. We're already seeing issues with food costs going up. We're seeing issues with droughts, with water becoming more and more scarce. Energy issues, we've seen energy weaponized against other countries. We've seen issues with our grid. Again, I'm not saying anything here that you don't already know, but the point I'm trying to make is this, is that I think it's going to be more imperative that you learn and develop the abilities that you can detach from, I hate to use the word system, but from the dependency, I guess is what I'm trying to find here. That if it comes down to it, you can break away and take care of these things yourself. And that takes a lot of time. Will you ever fully be 100% independent of the grid? I don't know. That's open to debate all the time. I see people going back and forth on that. But let me get back to the main point here. These are the concerns that I have. And to answer the question, well, what's informing that decision? Why do you feel that way? What do you see? What weighs heavily on my mind is, I think, what we're all seeing on the horizon. My personal concerns, and I may go into more detail in a future video that I break off and really discuss my own concerns, really relate to the issues that are beginning to play out on the world stage and will very likely amplify based on everything I'm studying in the next several years. If I could summarize it, I think, and this is how I position and phrase what's driving me right now as a prepper, the framework that I'm looking through, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here, is I think that we're in the early stages of collapse as a civilization, as a world. There's a lot of different factors that inform that decision, but I know that it may sound a bit bleak, but as you'll hear me say all the time on the channel, while I choose when possible to be an optimist, I've really resolved myself to a position of being a realist. I try to look at things the way they are, not the way I want to be or want them to be. I know that it's easy as a prepper. We're going to see things from a certain lens, and I get that. It's easy to see from a negative position, but I'm trying to look at the data as much as possible that I see and say, what can be drawn out from this? And I mentioned this several times on the channel before, but my background was in science, and listening to the scientific community right now, it's not too hard to figure out what's coming. And while I don't think the scientific community is perfect, I have this conversation with people all the time because, when I bring these issues up, I get that always thrown back in my face. I do appreciate the openness and peer review and other systems that are in place within the community, the scientific community, to try to even disprove what one may be trying to prove. Again, I don't think it's a perfect system by any means, but it has shown some very troubling trends that will and are already beginning to impact us all. I personally, and this is my take, I personally have a hard time seeing a future that does not involve learning to take care of yourself on so many levels, the things that I just discussed a second ago. We're watching multiple systems fail in our nation. We've watched nations wage war both physically and economically. We're seeing mistrust toward any type of leadership flourish, and rightfully so. We've watched the rise of autocracy, where there was once a promise of democracy. We're in a time, and I believe, entering into a period of extremes on many fronts. And I think the events of the last few years have served as a wake-up call, and many of you may have come to this channel because of the last 2 to 3 years, the events that have played out. And as we're seeing disruptions in our food due to extreme weather, input costs that are driving costs up right now, we're seeing different bacteria, different infections that are taking root and spreading because of monocultural practices and other things that are being done on a large-scale production level, that once one thing gets sick, for example, a chicken, it can spread very quickly. We're seeing all these multiple factors collide. I've used this term before on the channel, polycrisis, and I think that's where we're at right now. But having the ability to take care of the resources that you rely upon, such as food, water, energy, I think these are increasingly going to be your responsibility. And I know many watching this video, you may have your own reasons why you prepare. The prepping community, it's a big tent, and we each have our own concerns as to what motivates us. I've got several different friends in the community that are different ages that are preppers, and I talk to them, and they all have different takes on what concerns them. But if we were to try to find common ground, we all see challenges that concern us on the horizon, and I just express really what my concerns are. And I tend to be, again, introspective, and I apologize at this point in the video you're saying, where are you going with this? I'm just sharing kind of my take. This is a personal take. I know in the videos I try to do informal videos where I give information to help prepare people, but for a second I'm just pulling back and explaining my perspective and trying to answer this question of, am I going to be fully prepared? I, again, tend to be introspective, and I've tried to analyze my motivations internally, and I encourage everyone to do the same. I can say the push, that force that keeps me moving forward is not so much fear. Rather, it's just an acknowledgement of what I think we all see on the horizon. In 2023, I hope this channel will provide you with very useful information to guide you as you either start or you continue on your preparedness journey. There's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes. A lot of intentional effort is going to be put into this channel this year. There's a lot of, how should I say it, making changes behind the scenes to make sure that we're giving useful information to help you. And I know while there's been a sense of maybe things are returning to normal lately, I'm trying my hardest to take advantage of this time and shore things up, this kind of peace, this calm that we're in right now. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you for lending me your ears. I just wanted to share some of my own personal thoughts as of late. Again, I apologize. This is a different format than most of my videos, but I just wanted to take a moment to pull back and express and try to really work through the issue of, are we fully prepared? Will we ever be fully prepared? Again, I think if I could come to a conclusion and answer that question, I don't know. Find what will work for you. Find that period of time you want to prepare for. And once you've arrived, if that's where you're happy at, then I would encourage you to continue to either develop skills. But for me, I feel like I've just only scratched the surface. And I'm excited for the next 5 years, as there's so many things that I have planned to work on to develop my own skills to move me in the direction of self-sufficiency and learning more and more of the skills that I've been wanting to hone and perfect, I guess is the word I'm looking for. What are your thoughts? Are there things that you want to work on? Do you feel like you've arrived? Are there things that you feel you need to prioritize over the next few years? I would love to hear your feedback. What do you want to see on the channel over the next few years? Because I've got a lot of ideas and goals of where I want to be, but I always enjoy the community's feedback. As always, please stay safe out there.